Hi, my name is Abraham, and thank you for coming back to our channel again. Uh, if this is your first time on the channel, click the like button at the bottom and please share this with your friends if you find that we've added some value to you, simply because I am a sober person in recovery that offers newcomers suggestions about recovery. So, with that being said, again, I just humbly thank you for being back on the channel. I hope that you got something out of the last video. And if you haven't, go back to it and check it out. It was really interesting. But today I got something good for you. I know tomorrow is Labor's Day, and I just want to give you something for your holiday, okay? We're going to need 4 books. Now, I'm going to make a suggestion to you. You can listen to this in real time and go back later and get your books and underline it, because you know I don't like to give my opinion, and I often tell people, don't believe anything I say, but go back and research it for yourself and you'll have a greater appreciation for me. Simply because the more I learn, the less I find out that I know. And again, I've been doing this for 38 years and I'm grateful. I never had a relapse, and I know that addiction is 100% treatable. So without further ado, these are the 4 books that you're going to need. You're going to need your Narcotics Anonymous book. I'm going to reference it. You're going to need your Big Book Dictionary. You're going to need your 12 and 12 dictionary, because I don't want you to take my word for it, right? And you're going to need your Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. I want to tell you something real quickly. I was asked, and I humbly accepted it, an invitation to give a lead on yesterday. And the lead went well based on the feedback from the participants. And one of the participants, I often say this not in being rude, because we don't talk down about people. This is a program of upgrading your life, not degrading your life. But there was an individual who, I normally call the entertainers, and I'm an educator. And the entertainer, after I concluded giving the talk, which was well received, he made a comment, and the comment was, he is a greasy dope fiend and a real drunk. And here's a cat with 16 years, and I respect him a lot. But I didn't correct him, but I did share some things with him later that he disagreed with. And it's okay for us to disagree without being disagreeable, because none of us has figured this thing out. But what I shared with him was, in your big book, would you go with me kindly to, I believe it is, give me a second here. Forward to the first edition. Forward to the first edition. Now, his comment was, he's a grateful drunk and a greasy dope fiend, something to that nature. And it made me cringe, because we on this channel, and hopefully you, are trying to remove the negative stigma that's attached to addiction. But I showed him the second paragraph on the bottom of page XIII, forward to the first edition, and it merely states, when writing or speaking publicly about alcoholism, we urge each of our fellowship to omit his personal name, designating himself instead as a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. He got a little warm about it, but I understand that if you correct a fool, you have an argument. But if you correct a wise man, you've got a friend. So I also proceeded to take him to the Narcotics Anonymous book. And I wanted to show him in the introduction to the book, it simply says, let me get it right quick. If you go to your introduction in your book, it talks about our program. See the comment right here, our program? And I'm going to read it. Many books have been written about the nature of addiction. This book primarily concerns itself with the nature of recovery. If you're an addict and have found this book, please give yourself a break and read it. And I knew at that point that he had never read it, and therefore I didn't really get caught up in his comment. But I also showed him the page prior to the introduction. And it says, and I quote, "We cannot change the nature of the addict or the addiction. We can help to change the old lie." What's the old lie? Once an addict, always an addict. By striving to make recovery more available. God help us to remember this difference. So I'm out to carry the message of recovery and not spread the illness of addiction. So with that being said, let's just pray for all those who don't know they don't know. And I shared with him that the reason why it's possible he said that is because it's a resentment. He said as long as he doesn't forget it. Well, our book tells us on page 64, resentments, replaying a hurtful feeling over and over again, is the #1 offender. So why would you want to wear that as a badge of honor? And our NA book says that not only did I use drugs, but they used me. So if you're watching this, don't say anything negative about yourself other than your name and that you're a member. Now, with that being said, I want to draw your attention, since you are already on, forward to the first edition. This is going to be an interesting talk. Read the first paragraph. "We of Alcoholics Anonymous are more than 100 men and women who have recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body." Now I want you to get your dictionary that I was telling you about, or go back and look at it for yourself. Don't trust me. But I want to look up a word, and that word is seemingly. Seemingly. Because they recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. I want to read that definition to you. It simply means apparently to all outward appearances, evidently. But there is a definition of a word called seeming. And it says the same: apparent, outward, and often deceptive indication or appearance. So that's an interesting word, seemingly. So it was apparent, but it was deceptive. We recovered from a deceptive state of mind and body, okay? So notice what they described addiction as. A seemingly hopeless state of mind and body, but it was deceptive because we do have hope and we have help. Now I want you to go with me to page 23, and let's look at what the book is going to say on page 23. What the real problem is. You remember, seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. This is going to be interesting. So let's take a look at what the big book author tells us in the first paragraph. Second sentence. "Therefore, the main problem of the alcoholic centers in his mind rather than in his body." That's very important because that coincides with what our sponsors, you remember the word from our sponsors, what they said in the first sentence on Roman numeral page XIII. We recover from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. And then they go on to tell us how we can recover from this seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. But as we read, most people don't like to read. So watch this. Here's a question. Who's worse? The man who cannot read and won't learn, or the man who does know how to read but won't? I'll tell you who I think is worse. Both. Because the guy who can't read, he doesn't want to learn how. And the man who can, he doesn't find the time to. That's why I often say, the more I learn, the less I find out I know. Because when you stop learning, you stop leading and you stop living. So Let's continue to look at this seemingly what appears to be hopeless state of mind and body. On page 23, we just noticed what the problem is. It never said drugs or narcotics was the problem. It said the main problem centered in the mind rather than in the body. But they recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. Why? Addiction is twofold. It's a mental obsession and a physical craving. In other words, an obsession is an idea that overrules every other idea. But I can't crave for something until I've ingested it somehow into my system. That's when the one is too many and the 1,000 isn't enough. Why? My thinking and my actions have caused me to get in trouble. Now, look at page 18 of your big book. Let's look at what the big book authors say about addiction. They say, and I quote, an illness of this sort, and we have come to believe it an illness, involves those about us in a way no other human sickness can. Now notice, they never called it anything other than a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body and an illness, obviously a mental illness. But they never called it a disease. Our friends call it a disease. They never called it a disease. In other words, the only place in this big book of Alcoholics Anonymous where the word disease is on page 64 when they reference a spiritual disease. Because how can it be a disease if it has no germ or virus? But that's a whole nother question. Watch this. So they tell us they call it an illness or a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. Now, I want you to go and look at what the doctor said, what Dr. Silkworth said on page Roman numeral XXIX. XXIX. But before we get there, I want to take a trail. XXVI. Let's look at what Silkworth said. XXVI. The physician who at our request gave us this letter and has been kind enough to enlarge upon his views in another statement which follows. Notice what he's going to say. In this statement, he confirms that we who suffer alcoholic torture must believe. What must we believe? That the body of the alcoholic is quite as abnormal as the mind. You know, it's nothing to be embarrassed about because I too suffered from the same thing, a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. But I have recovered, and page 29 tells us, if you go to it, that first sentence, further on, clear-cut directions are given showing how we recovered. You remember those more than 100 men and women, they said they had recovered from this seemingly hopeless state of mind and body, or this illness, this mental illness, right? This mental obsession and this physical craving. But one thing I really, really want to get to, I want us to go to Roman numeral page XXIX. Let's take a look at something that most people miss. And it's found in the doctor's opinion. And it goes to talk about how men and women drink because they like the effect that it produces. And then we go to Roman numeral XXIX. Look at the last sentence on the top of that page. This is repeated over and over unless this person, meaning the one that suffered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body, can experience an entire psychic change. Oh boy, that sounds like a mind change. There is very little hope of his recovery. On the other hand, and strange as this may seem to those who do not understand, and I think about our brother, and he's a good guy, but the cat I told you I met yesterday who kept referencing the fact that he was still a real dolphin and some crazy stuff, right? But he doesn't understand because he hasn't went through the process after 16 years. He's clean, but he never got sober. Once a psychic change has occurred, the very same person who seemed doomed, who had so many problems he despaired of ever solving them, watch this, suddenly finds himself easily able to control his desire for alcohol, the only effort necessary being that required a few simple rules. And we went over that last week. But I want to show you something. Read the next sentence. They said, or the next paragraph, no human power could relieve our addiction. My sponsor, the fellowship, the counselors, your therapist. Notice what it says. Many have cried out to me in sincere and despairing appeal. Doctor, I cannot go on like this. I have everything to live for. I'm going to stop, but I cannot. You must help me. Notice the doctor's reply. Faced with this problem, if a doctor is honest with himself, he must sometimes feel his own inadequacy. Although he gives all that's in him, it's often is not enough. One feels that something more than human power is needed to produce the essential psychic change. And then it goes on to talk about all these various methods. But it's interesting, the doctor found out that the only way to have this spiritual awakening or this change is to go through this 12-step process. Now, what I want to show you next is that self can't remove self. So there's nothing that self can do, because self is the reason that I'm here. Because watch this. I had a lot of self-knowledge, but I never had a spiritual awakening until I got into this program, because I didn't think I needed one. Let's go to page 62, and let's take a look at why self can't help you. Notice the first paragraph, and I want you to count all the prefix or every self that you see in this one paragraph. Selfishness, self-centeredness, that we think is the root of our troubles. Driven by 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, and self-pity, we step on the toes of our fellows and they retaliate. Sometimes they hurt us seemingly without provocation, but we invariably find that at some time in the past we had made decisions based on self, which later placed us in a position to be hurt. So our troubles, we think, are basically of our own making. When I can take 100% responsibility for my own decisions, I can recover. They arise out of ourselves, and the alcoholic is an extreme example of self-will run riot, though he usually doesn't think so. Above everything else, we alcoholics must be rid of this selfishness. We must, or it kills us. Notice this. God makes that possible. And there often seems no way of entirely getting rid of self without his aid. You know, if I'm suffering from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body, and I can't put it back together myself, well, I need to consult the manufacturer who created it, because in all truth and honesty, I have no idea where my mind is. In other words, the locality of my mind. I know where my brain is, and I don't think you know where yours is either, but you know you have one. And I don't know where my spirit is. So watch this. In order to fix my mind, I need to access the one that created it. I like to use an analogy, not to be braggadocious or any of that kind of crazy stuff, but I'm a watch collector, and I buy a lot of high-end watches. And I have on what is called a Rolex Jubilee. If you can look at it, you see there are diamonds around it, and there are diamonds around the bezel, and you can see it's a real Rolex. It's not something from out west. You can look at the second hand. You see how it's sweeping? It's perpetual, right? And I paid a lot of money for it because it wasn't a pre-owned. I got it from the authorized dealer. I got it from the Rolex shop. But with the green box and the paperwork came a lifetime guarantee. In other words, if something occurred to the watch, I can take it back to the Rolex store. They can trace the serial number, and they would replace or fix whatever is wrong with my watch. Well, guess what? That's what they're saying about a spiritual awakening. In order for me to recover, I must recover first spiritually before I recover mentally and physically. Because guess what? Step one deals with my physical problem. I'm powerless and unmanageable. Step two deals with my mental problem. I need power. Why? I need to be returned back to sanity. But guess what number three says? I got to make a decision to take my will and my life back to the manufacturer so the manufacturer can fix it, right? Because I cannot fix it by myself. Because if I attempt to fix it by myself, guess what I'm doing? I'm using self, and self cannot help self. If self could, I wouldn't have came into recovery. Now, I want to prove that point. Go to page 95. Page 95. And there are a lot of people who have a hard time with this, but let's take a look at something. Top of the page. Unless your friend wants to talk further about himself, do not wear out your welcome. Give him a chance to think it over. If you do stay, let him steer the conversation in any direction he likes. Talking about a 12-step call, but watch this. Sometimes a new man is anxious to proceed at once, and you may be tempted to let him do so. This is sometimes a mistake. If he has trouble later, he is likely to say you rushed him. You will be most successful with alcoholics if you do not exhibit any passion for crusade or reform. Never talk down to an alcoholic, like we talked about with our brother, from any moral or spiritual hilltops. Simply lay out the kit of spiritual tools for his inspection. Show him how they work with you. Offer him friendship and fellowship. Tell him that if he wants to get well, you will do anything to help. Notice what it's going to say. If he is not interested in your solution, if he expects you to act only as his banker for his financial difficulties or nurse for his sprees, relationship coach, Uber driver, you may have to drop him, fire him, get rid of him until he changes his mind. This he may do after he gets some more hurt. Hopefully he doesn't have to. But watch this. If he is sincerely interested, this is what I want to get to, and wants to see you again, ask him to read this book in the interval. Read this book, then come back to him and ask him if he's ready to make a decision. And hopefully that decision is yes or no. After doing that, he must decide for himself whether he wants to go on. He should not be pushed or prodded by you, his wife, or his friends. If he's to find God, the desire must come from within. You remember our book says that it's better to meet God by yourself than to be introduced to him by somebody who never met him. If he thinks he can do the job in some other way or prefers some other spiritual approach, encourage him to follow his own conscience. We have no monopoly on God. We merely have an approach that works with us. And what worked? We can recover from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body if we consult the one that created the mind and the body. Now, I want to take you in closing to page 30. Page 30. And these are for all my friends who don't understand step one. First paragraph. Most of us have been unwilling to admit we were real alcoholics. No person likes to think he is bodily and mentally different from his fellows. In other words, like we talked about, seemingly hopeless state of mind and body is abnormal. You remember? We must understand that. Therefore, it is not surprising that our drinking careers have been characterized by countless vain attempts to prove we can drink like other people. The idea that somehow, someday, he will control and enjoy his drinking is the great obsession, you remember mental obsession, of every abnormal drinker. The persistence of this illusion, circle that word, is astonishing. Many pursue it into the gates of insanity or death. Now, this is the point I want to lead up to. The word illusion. We already looked up seemingly. It appeared to be, but not really. It's apparent. But let's look up the word illusion. Illusion in your 12 and 12 dictionary, because it's not in the Big Book dictionary, that's why I told you to purchase both, says the definition is an error in perception, concept, or belief. So that's what an illusion is. But notice, let's keep reading. They said many people pursue the illusion into insanity or even death. You know, insanity, keep doing the same thing over and over again, keep coming back to treatment, keep relapsing, or death, that's self-explanatory. OD when you didn't have to. Watch this. We learned, based on our experience of using, that we had to fully concede or admit to our innermost selves that we were alcoholic. This is the first step in recovery, the delusion. Oh, another word. That we are like other people, or presently maybe, has to be smashed. These are the directions for taking step one. But there's an interesting word in here, and it's called delusion. We just looked at illusion. Now we're going to look at delusion, because they said the delusion that we are like other people using, or presently maybe, has to be smashed, because if we don't smash it, it becomes a thought, becomes an action, because now you have a reservation. But let's look at the word delusion. In your big book dictionary, it says false, psychotic belief, unsound and misleading reasoning. It's not logical. So watch this. I have a favorite magician, and he's an illusionist. And what he does is he does tricks, but he compromises your five senses. You know it's a trick. You don't know how he did it, but it blows you away because he does something with magic. Illusionist. In other words, an illusion is something people or others do to you. But a delusion is something that you do to yourself in your thinking. But it's not sound thinking, it's psychotic. Watch this. Your illusion could be the effect, but the delusion is the cause, because the cause is the seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. Now, in closing, this is where I wanted to go to. The only thing that can help you is you must, as they said, undergo a complete psychic change. And notice what step 12 says. Having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps. So what's the result of working the 12 steps? To have a spiritual awakening. Why? Because it's the only thing that's going to relieve you from the seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. That's the message we want to carry to the alcoholic and the addict that's still suffering. But you can only do that, like page 164 says, and I want to conclude. Page 164 illustrates it pretty well. Let me get to it here. Here it is. Second paragraph. Our book is meant to be suggestive only. We realize we know only a little. God will constantly disclose more to you and to us, more to be revealed. Ask him in your morning meditation what you can do each day for the man who is still sick. Where? In his mind and in his body. The answer will come if your own house is in order. So first, I got to get me together before I can attempt to help you. How can I help you recover if I haven't recovered? But obviously, you cannot transmit something you haven't got. See to it that your relationship with him is right, and great events will come to pass for you and countless others. This is the great fact for us. You know, in order to carry this message, you have to have a relationship, and that relationship is the only thing that can give you the power, because you and I suffer from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body, and we have to go back to the manufacturer. Like if anything happened to the watch, I would have to go back to Rolex. You got to go back to the creator in order to get yourself together. So with that being the case, I'm going to leave with Herbert Spencer, page 568. There is a principle which is bar against all information, which is proof against all argument, and which cannot fail to keep a man in everlasting ignorance. That principle is contempt prior to investigation. Let me give you an Abrahamism. There is something much more dangerous than the illness of addiction. I believe it's the ignorance of the people that are trying to carry the message. It's the ignorance of not knowing about recovery. So the title of this video, and here's the question: is your perception causing your deception? Look, this is your big brother Abraham. I hope you got some value out of it. Try to find some reality between the illusion and the delusion, because your perception is causing your deception merely because as a man or woman think it in their mind, so is the person. I thank you for listening to us. I hope you enjoyed it. Please click the like, share it with your friends, and you know what? Have a great Labor Day. All right? Talk to you soon. Bye.